This video is once again sponsored by the wonderful people at Squarespace. It goes without saying that being the son of Michael Schumacher brings with it a lot of pressure, but if there's anyone who can deal with that pressure, it's Mick. Having won both the FIA Formula 3 and Formula 2 championships, he began his Formula 1 career at the beginning of the year with Haas. The only problem is, Haas are a team so slow and Mazepin is a teammate so useless that it's been difficult to gauge how good his time so far in Formula 1 has been. So let's fix that, shall we? Now, of course, I don't have access to all the data that F1 teams have, but I do have access to one Nikita Mazepin and a Haas VF21. Or at least their Wikipedia pages. Same thing. So in this video, I'm going to use those two metrics, and some others where I see fit, to try and answer the question, how well has Mick Schumacher's debut season gone? First things first, let's talk about the bad points. Sorry for raining on your parade, Mick fans, but this stuff's gotta be said. According to a totally reliable source I found on Reddit, Mick Schumacher has caused over $1.4 million worth of damage to the car, while Nikita Mazepin has caused a mere $600,000. Crashing isn't really something we've seen from Mick Schumacher before, as in the junior formulas he was always quite consistent, but whether it be the boat-like handling of the VF21 or the huge power difference between it and the F2 car he'd been driving last year, Schumacher spent a fairly large proportion of his first few races in the wall. Both he and Mazepin spun on the first lap of the Bahrain Grand Prix, although it must be said that Schumacher managed to keep it going while Mazepin's debut lasted barely one braking zone. In Imola he spun in the race, but so did both of his fellow rookies, so it's excusable I guess. A large proportion of the damage costs have come from two crashes in Monaco and Hungary respectively, and the worst thing about them was that they were in FP3, so he really didn't need to be pushing as hard as he was. He also spun his way out of his first ever Q2 session in France, but I'm starting to feel mean now, so let's take some time to reset our emotions. With an ad break. If you need a website, then you need Squarespace. Simple as that. Having a good-looking blog, portfolio, online store, or whatever it is you're doing with a website in 2021 is just as important as what you're putting on that website. You could have the most incredible piece of modern art for sale, but if your website doesn't look the part, then nobody's going to give it a second look. Which is why you need Squarespace. I've told you this before, but in case you've forgotten, Squarespace is the all-in-one platform for building your website and getting a domain to host it on. Every single Squarespace template will work with what you want to do with it, so if you want a bright pink border around your super serious piece of work, then who's going to stop you? If you want to have a play around with what Squarespace can do for you, then just head over to squarespace.com for a free trial. And when you're ready to hit publish, go to squarespace.com/JohnWarren and use code JohnWarren for 10% off your first website or domain. But anyway, back to Mick. In terms of what's been good this season, I'm going to need a lot longer than I did for the bad points to list. Firstly, he's never been out-qualified by Nikita Mazepin. While he was technically out-qualified in Monaco and Hungary, I'm not going to count them, as Mazepin didn't even have to set a lap to out-qualify Mick in either of them. As long as he left the garage, he'd have been ahead. In terms of races, things have been a bit more similar between the two, by virtue of Mazepin threatening to put him in the wall every time he's trying to get past. But I'm not here to complain about Mazepin, as much as it may seem that way on this channel. Earlier on, I mentioned that Schumacher spun out of being able to compete in Haas's first Q2 session of the season. But let me rephrase that. Mick Schumacher put a Haas in Q2. On merit. Haas are very open about their disregard for 2021, and they've been convincingly the slowest team on the grid, often by margins of a whole second. And Mick Schumacher took that car into Q2 at the most demanding track on the calendar. I don't care that he crashed, that's some achievement. Now, he finished 19th in the race, because Haas are shit. Another of his amazing qualifying performances came in Turkey, where he put it into Q2 and beat Mazepin by a margin of almost 3 seconds. Again, the Haas car did Haas things in the race and he came home P19, but that was only really because he was torpedoed by an angry Fernando Alonso in the opening stages of the race. In the races, he went through a phase of beating Mazepin by a margin of over 50 seconds for fun, which is basically a second a lap every single lap of every single race. Not too bad, huh? Nowadays, those margins aren't as big, but it doesn't take a genius to realize that this isn't because Mick has forgotten how to drive. But anyway, I've sort of gone off topic here, so let's try and pluck some numbers out of thin air to answer the title of this video. A bit like AWS does, but with some actual logic applied. I headed over to racefans.com and had a look at this probably accurate table, which told me that the average qualifying gap between Mick Schumacher and Nikita Mazepin is 0.923 seconds in Mick's favor. Which is a lot. In fact, the only divide worse than this one is the one between Vettel and Stroll, which is apparently 2.7 seconds. this whole logical thing isn't really holding up that well looking at these numbers, so let's ignore that one, eh? In terms of racing, Nikita Mazepin hasn't had a single lap inside the top 10, while Schumacher has had 2 laps in 8th, 11 laps in 9th, and 11 laps in 10th. Of course, these didn't ever amount to points, but it's still a good indicator of how Schumacher's able to keep his car inside of the pit stop window of the other cars for longer, thanks to better pace. As for races classified as completed, Schumacher has won more of them too, with 3 races finishing on the lead lap versus 2 for Mazepin. Although I dedicated the opening of this video to talking about his crashes, Schumacher's also finished more races than Mazepin, which is a good indicator that he doesn't make mistakes when it really counts and is therefore dealing with the pressure a lot better. In terms of his lap 1s, Schumacher has a net gain of 14, showing as a good starter, although when you're starting from second last every race, it's really not that impressive to not have lost positions. But then again, he gained positions in a Haas. So to cut a lot of waffle short, let me just give you my thoughts on the question. Essentially, I think that Mick Schumacher's debut season has been good, but not impressively good. The reason I say this is because of the immense expectation I've had for him when he entered the sport, and the fact that he's lived up to that expectation in my mind. Ultimately, when you're in a car as unbelievably terrible as the Haas, the only comparison that can reasonably be drawn is between you and your teammate, and Mick has very much succeeded in that task. Sure, he's had his moments in those crashes, but he's always got back on his feet, and again, Mazepin's had the exact same moments at other points in the season, which signifies to me that the VF21 is not an easy car to drive. To compare Schumacher's career to his father's, as some people have done, is always going to be an unfair comparison. Not only are they not racing directly against one another, making it a hard comparison, but it's also unfair on Mick to put that sort of pressure on him. There's a reason he raced under his mother's maiden name in karts, because otherwise the pressure on him to be just as good as Michael would likely have crippled him. Now he is of course publicly a Schumacher, but more than that, he's a racing driver. He's unusual in being the son of Michael, but that doesn't make him any less of his own driver. After all, he reached F1 by winning the F2 championship, which being the son of Michael does not automatically grant you. But anyway, I'm waffling now. So yeah, Mick's debut season was good. I hope that next year Haas will put together a half decent car so we can actually see him fighting other people, but sadly I don't think the chances of that happening are very high. But what do you think? Have you been impressed by Mick Schumacher this year? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Thank you for watching, and I will see you all later.